Welcome.
So I won't be able to say.
Welcome. We have a full council here and appreciate all of you. We appreciate those who are in attendance that may or may not participate today. For whatever reason you're here, we welcome you and thank you for being here. Before this meeting, we did have a 6 o'clock work session that the public is always, it is noticed and the public is always invited to be here. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 subjects that we are able to talk about in a little more depth. So you're always welcome to be here. This is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020, and we appreciate again all of you being here. We're going to start by having a Pledge of Allegiance, and Joe Cochran, if you'll just come and lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, that'd be just great. Thanks, Joe. Right there's good, Joe.
Say with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joe, we hope you remember that your dad or somebody brought you and you got involved with city council. Thank you. We've asked also Kit Thornell, he's a high councilman in the Mueller Park Stake, to offer a word of prayer for us. Please, Kit. Right here, please. Make sure that light is on green if you need to touch it.
Our kind, eternal Father in heaven, we bow our heads this evening with gratitude in our hearts for the many blessings which we enjoy, among which is this wonderful area in which we live. We're grateful for the liberties that we enjoy, and we're grateful for those who serve us in the capacity of government, as well as defending freedoms and helping us here at home. We ask thy Spirit to be with those who are speaking or taking part and making decisions tonight, that they will be blessed with wisdom and understanding. We ask you to please be with those who are struggling during this time of pandemic, that they will be blessed and feel peace and comfort in struggles and know thy love for them. We're grateful unto thee again for this wonderful area in which we live and all that we've been blessed with. I ask you to please help us to recognize our duty because of all the blessings that we enjoy, and pray for these things in the sacred name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Thornell. At this time, we have a public comment period, which lasts up to 10 minutes. Each person is allowed 2 minutes to come to the podium and speak. And there's just a little reminder here that the 2 minutes is up. And then please give way and yield to the next person if you would. Give your name and where you live. And we're happy to have you come forward. Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to sound
You'll
off.
reach down and just talk right down closer to
Right,
that.
okay,
Please.
very close. My name is Gloria Hillier. I live at 1319 South 400 West in Bountiful. We're at the more southerly end of our neighborhood, which was built between 15th South and this way from 5th South. The Bountiful Washington Elementary was right at the northern part of our neighborhood. I want to read this to you. When we bought our homes, we were told by the builder that there would be a large park at 1250 South by 2nd West. The actual park ended up across the street behind the houses on 300 West, a sliver of land with a slide and a swing. The neighborhoods complained with noise and everything else. It was so small. The promised park then became the city yard, and our little park became the dog yard. or the dog park. Our neighborhood of 80-something homes plus houses all around us had to go to brand new schools every year in Bountiful. There was no school close to us. Then they built Washington. But now, we have been there since we were about 26 years old. I'm 86 now. And we're dying off, and young families are moving in with many children. They will be sent to Bountiful Elementary across 5 Points intersection. The park there on the school property is a fine park with many wonderful things and a tennis court. But that intersection is way too dangerous for our children to have access to that park, going across 5 major roads. We need a large park for soccer, baseball, playground equipment, family gathering areas. We have been paying taxes for 60 years to build parks for other parts of Bountiful, all beautiful, fun places, and I'm sure each one of them had to raise taxes to do it. But isn't it our turn now? We've been there 60 years. Can't we have a park?
Thank you, Mrs. Hilliard. Next.
Ron Mortensen, live here in Bountiful. You know, the question I have is, we're in a period where small businesses are struggling just to make ends meet. We got homeowners that are having their incomes cut or losing their jobs. And now we're looking and talking about a property tax increase. And we know they always say it's a small increase, but it's incremental. And when you add all these little pieces up, it comes out to be a substantial amount. So I just question whether this is the time. The other thing I question, why aren't we using the RAP tax to fund the trails and other things? We have a RAP tax. Let's use that, and let's not shift this cost over to the property tax. The other thing is, I note we're building a veterans park here in Bountiful, and that's being done totally by private donations and volunteer work. So why can't the trail people follow that example and go out and take care of some of these things without forcing homeowners to pay for their projects? The city has large reserves. I'd suggest you look at using some of them for this. And I'd also question why the city has spent $27,000 for a survey to convince Bountiful residents to vote for this tax. And what I want to know is, are you going to give me, when I oppose this, $27,000 to go out and conduct the survey and to do this? Because otherwise, you're using taxpayer money against your own citizens, and that's not appropriate. So I'd just encourage you to vote no on the proposition to go ahead with the bond. And I'd have one other request for you, and that is, if you do place the bond on the ballot, I would like to write the argument against the proposition that goes in the voter information pamphlet. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Please, and then you. Tim, then you, then you.
So my name's Dave Reardon. I've sent an email to a few of you about Washington Elementary Park. I've been a head coach for Little League football. I grew up playing football in Texas, where we had stadiums in every city for Little League football. And we need it here desperately. We don't have anywhere to play our football games. We always have to go right now to Viewmont. But not only do we want to have a park over there for playing activity, but a Little League football stadium. I got 50 kids waiting for me to go back to practice to tell them how this all went, and they're all excited. So we'd be the first ones in the entire state of Utah to have a Little League football stadium. It'd bring a lot of great people to the area, and everybody else would probably want to do it too. So the whole question to you is, why not us? Let's start it now and start a trend and lead by this, be a pacemaker, set an example for everybody else. So that's what we really, really need in Bountiful, and I'm from Bountiful too. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Van Schmidt, 2524 South 100 West. Good evening. I'm a Bountiful resident of 17 years. Before I became blind, I worked for a municipal utility aggregator, so I do know municipal power. The first point I want to make is that Bountiful City Light and Power was formed as a public service, providing that service at cost, and is certainly not in the business of trying to maximize profits off its residents. Let's talk residential solar in Bountiful. Through mid-2017, 200 Bountiful residents had installed residential solar. During times they didn't generate enough for their own use, BCLP supplied that supplemental power at the 9.25 cent per kilowatt hour retail rate. Any generation beyond what they used was sent to the grid, credited at that same 9.25 cent rate. That's called net metering. BCLP realized that this excess power they were buying at 9.25 cents, they would have been able to buy at 4 or 6 cents from the resource pool. This glitch gave net metering customers an economic windfall, while the rest of BCLP's customers absorbed the reported $100,000 annual loss. Now, I don't own solar, but I can see this needed to change. On July 1st, 2017, BCLP implemented the new feed-in tariff. It's a blatantly unethical policy. You don't get to use your own solar generation for your home. BCLP forces you to sell them your entire solar output at that low wholesale rate. Then they turn around and make you buy back the home energy you use at 9.25 cents. You're taking up to a 3 to 5 cent loss on each kilowatt hour of your own generation, which you should be using for free. It's all pure profit for BCLP, pretty sneaky. There's a simple solution. Why not let these customers just use their own generation? There's no charge or credit because it doesn't even touch BCLP's system. This requires no change whatsoever to BCLP's billing or service. The customer just reroutes their meter. Charge them 9.25 cents for any additional power needed, credit them for any excess power generated at the 4 or 6 cent replacement rate and supply it to your other customers for the retail rate. $100,000 problem solved. I'd love the chance to discuss this with your power board at their next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Shauna Dopp, and I live at 433 Canyon Estates Drive here in Bountiful. I'm here to stand in support of the bond to purchase the land that Washington Elementary was on for the purpose of green space and also to improve the city's trail systems. I ask that as part of improving our trails, that Bountiful Boulevard would get walking and cycling striping lanes from our boundary at North Salt Lake to Vineyard. Bountiful Boulevard is an integral part of our city's trail systems. It connects trails all along our mountainside. Holbrook, Sessions, Keeney Creek, Mueller Park, Elephant Rock, Highland Oaks, North Canyon, and in North Salt Lake, it connects to Woodbriar, Wild Rose, and Tunnel Springs. In fact, Bountiful Boulevard is part of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail itself. So it is a trail itself. My friends and I enjoy cycling on Bountiful Boulevard, but we feel much safer cycling in the portion in North Salt Lake where it is striped. If you've driven that, you probably noticed there is a definite stop and start. Those striping lines are kind of a notice to drivers that they should be on alert, that this is a place that is frequented by runners, walkers, and cyclists, and that they need to be careful and share the road. At any given time of day, you can see many, many walkers and runners on the boulevard. They move from the sidewalk out into the road, trying to social distance as we should. And I think that even when COVID is under control, those social distancing things are still going to be a part of our lives. And so that's another reason that we should do this thing. For the safety of our residents and for those who come to Bountiful to recreate, please allocate funds to stripe lanes for walkers and cyclists. I believe that Bountiful wants to be known as a city that encourages healthy lifestyles and outdoor recreation. And I hope that if the bond passes, that you'll put striping on Bountiful Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, did you get your questions answered, or do you need to say something?
I wanted to
Please do it. Please do it, and then we're going to be done, but I wanted to make sure that you got a chance.
thank you. I was just trying to get some clarification about what the bond covered and those kinds of issues. But my name's Larry Mulcock. I live in South Bountiful. I've been in the city about 3 years, so I'm not a seasoned citizen, but I'm getting there. I was a little concerned about a letter from the state auditor's office regarding some procedural things that were not followed in terms of public hearings and so forth. I'm sure you're aware of that letter. It seems to me that when a letter like that appears, there's maybe some other issues that are more systemic than just this particular situation. And I don't know, but it certainly raises a red flag for me. And I would appreciate you addressing that issue tonight somewhere in the course of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Probably during the meeting, it's not going to happen, but if for any of those questions, for those people who have come to the podium to say something and need just a little more information, staff may be able to answer those things for you today. Gary, you can talk to Gary, our city manager, Gary Hill, and either tonight or at some other time with one of the staff members, we'll get an answer. We'll get an answer for you. But I assure you, we've been 39 years in a row with the highest financial award you can get in Utah. So I guarantee you the Bountiful's really good. Okay, I think we're done. Well, we really have been 10 minutes, but you know what? Do you have something quick to say? Okay, come on, do it.
My name is Spencer Baker. These are my brothers and friends. We all live over by Washington, and we think the area should be used for a skate park. It's a good place to put a skate park, and Bountiful doesn't have a skate park. Neither do any of like the near cities around us. Layton does, Salt Lake does, but that's it. And the city tore down our pit, and we have nowhere to skateboard now, and that would be a perfect place to put a park. So thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. Good. All of you young people have been great about this, by the way, so we really appreciate that. Years ago, it wasn't that way and really caused a problem at one time when it was voted down. And so you have to know that people like Richard, particularly, that's been here a long time, has an appreciation for how they've acted. Would I be right about that, Richard?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, okay, well, thank you all for your public comments. We appreciate it. We'll look to consider approval of the previous minutes held on July 28th, 2020. If there are no corrections or additions to those minutes, then I would look for a motion.
Move to approve as printed.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And council reports. So Richard, we'll start this time with you.
Nothing this evening, thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Richard. And Millie.
Nothing this evening.
Okay. Yes, there is something. I just want to tell you that the last two Saturdays, and maybe Chris is going to talk about this, but we had youth council who helped do grass over to the new Veterans
They
Park.
did, and someone from our leadership will report on that later on.
Oh, okay, okay, good. Okay, well, then I'll
But yes,
save it. Then I'll
yes,
save it.
they have been an outstanding.
Okay. Well, anyway, you're doing a wonderful job because they were there and they did great. Kendall,
Nothing tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
thank you. Chris,
Well, Mayor, you took some of my thunder.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, for coming and participating in laying sod. That was wonderful to see you there. That was very nice. Millie, she brought two of her sons and they laid sod.
They just wanted to play in the dirt. I'm sorry.
They were wonderful. Now, just for a little statistic, last Saturday, we in 1 hour and 10 minutes laid 60 pallets of sod. And one of the contractors that were there said, I've never seen sod laid so fast.
11,000 square feet.
Yes. We had Bountiful High School soccer team, girls, that carried most of the weight.
That's right.
And we had young men, elementary school soccer club that came, and they were wonderful. We had this past week, the American flag has gone up at the Veterans Park. Every morning the flag goes up. Sorry. Every night before the sun goes down, the flag comes down. We put in a number of granite areas in the park. And when you have a moment, please drive by and take a look at that park. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful park in honor of our veterans. Mayor, one other thing if I could add.
Sure.
Would Richard Watson please come up, Richard, and give us a report on concert in the park?
Okay, before I talk about the concerts, Casey Bowen from the Emergency Preparedness Council was going to be here. He was going to talk about the brush clearing for fire prevention, but he told me, tell the council that they're preparing a report and it's going to be presented to the city council and Gary Hill with complete numbers. And I think Dave Edwards will present the report to you. So, okay. So last Friday we had our first concert of the summer and it went off really well, actually. We didn't have like a big crowd like we normally did, but that was okay. And we had Rock Hill paint the circles like we talked about 2 weeks ago. However, we needed more circles, but we have a great city, we have great residents and a great audience because they were able to distance themselves on their own. So that was pretty good. Love how they cooperated. And we had the stage roped off and the band was incredible. I can't believe we didn't have this band before. They were really good. And so this week we're going to be doing the same. And I'm going to leave some schedules for everybody. I don't know if I have enough, but I'll just leave them with Gary. So Vision Band is our next concert. And then the following concert will be Greg Simpson, who's replacing Green River that canceled because they couldn't travel because of this COVID-19. And then end the summer, we'll finish off the season at the end of the month. So, I was going to mention also, in case Davis County Health comes to us about the concerts, Galen and Gary asked me to fill out this little template, and it actually provides what's going on with each concert. So I have, if anybody wants a copy of this, I'll email it, or should I just hang on to it? Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Nope.
All right.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks for letting us do the concerts. I was hesitant about doing these concerts, but after Friday night, I'm very happy that we did. It was a great success. So thank you.
Super. Okay, before we leave Chris here, you have anything else, Chris? So these 2 Saturdays at 7 o'clock in the morning, between the 2 Saturdays, there was 2 hours and about 20 minutes that 18,000 square feet of sod was laid down. And there's 5,000 square feet more left to do to, I think, complete the whole park. That is an amazing sight over there to see that many people volunteering. Ron, Chris, Rob, Doug, a bunch of those who are on this committee have done an amazing job to be where we are with that park. Good job, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. We laid sod in 100-degree temperature and many people came by and said, it'll never grow. Drive by, you'll see it's growing. It's growing.
Mm-hmm. He's watering it. Okay. Kate.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Thank you. So is there a BYC? Okay, oh, that's the report. Okay, oh, good. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Emma Moulton. I'm the city manager of the Bountiful City Youth Council. And even with all the restrictions on COVID, we've been able to have some pretty awesome activities recently. So last Saturday, well, the last 2 Saturdays, we were able to help lay sod for the new Veterans Park, and that was an amazing experience. I didn't realize how heavy sod was. It's really heavy. But with enough of us there and all the other groups that came, it was a really incredible experience, and we were able to see the flag being raised, I think last Saturday for one of the first times. And that was a very simple but moving experience for all of us. And I think we'll remember that for a long time. We also have our first meeting next Tuesday, And we will be holding our meetings at North Canyon Park in the auditorium area. So hopefully that will work out. We're excited to introduce all of our new members this year and just get started on a super fun year for Bountiful City Youth Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma.
We'll consider the approval now of expenditures greater than $1,000 paid July 20th and 27th, 2020, and the June 2020 financial report. So unless there's some corrections again or additions to that, I would look for a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the expenditures greater than $1,000 paid July 20th and 27th, 2020, and June 2020 financial report.
And I'll look for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. And we'll turn time over to Gary Hill to talk about Y2 analytics. Again, we sure thank you for all the hard work that's been done there.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is ratification of a contract we've already entered into with Y2 Analytics for the survey that was presented tonight. As you know, a decision wasn't made the night Y2 came to the council. And so I spoke with individual council members after the meeting, and consistent with city policies, executed a contract in the amount of, excuse me, I've got to get to my own staff report here. In the amount of $28,500 less the refund for the names we're able to provide. So we just look for council ratification of that contract tonight.
Good, I will look for a motion.
Question first, if I could, Mayor.
Please.
Gary, was this contract for a survey to convince people to vote for a bond?
No, it's illegal for the city once you pass a resolution to convince anybody of a bond. So the purpose of it was, as you all know, to give you information to decide whether or not you felt comfortable asking the residents to put the question on the ballot.
So in our discussion at our last meeting, it seems like all of our discussion was gauged towards finding out what residents felt about the issue. Is
Yes.
that what was done with the survey?
Yes. There was a portion of the survey, it was not solicited by us, but it is a product of Y2, where they pointed out information that tended to be more persuasive to residents or not, but that wasn't anything that we asked them to do or provide. And as I mentioned, state law prohibits the city anyway from advocating for or against a bond proposition once you, once it's put on, once a resolution is passed. So.
Why in the world would a city want to find out what residents think before they pass a resolution to put a bond on the ballot?
I'm assuming it's a rhetorical question.
No, I want an answer. Are there reasons why you would want to know ahead of time how residents feel?
Well, I can just tell you what the council expressed. The council was concerned initially, especially that in light of COVID-19, that it might be offensive to residents to put a bond question out there.
Thank you. This was a serious concern of the council. In fact, there was a lot of discussion on the council of whether it was even wise to pursue this. And I just want to express in this meeting that this was not taken to try to convince anyone of anything. This was taken to find out if there was even a chance of this happening, if residents were favorable to the idea, unfavorable to the idea, how the pandemic may have affected those kinds of opinions, and whether it was wise to move forward. So personally, I appreciate the information that was brought and presented in our study session today, work session today. I think there are a lot of really key pieces of information in that help me make a decision on how I will vote. And I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the contract posthumously with Y2 Analytics.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item, Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. The second item is really the topic of the evening, And this is whether or not the city council would consider a resolution that would place a ballot question on the November ballot. The ballot question would be, and you have a draft, a sample in your packet as to whether or not residents would support a general obligation bond for the purchase and improvement of the former Washington Elementary site and potentially additional funding available for trails. One of the additional questions the city council had, and for which they contracted Y2 Analytics to find out, was whether or not there would be support to ask for money in addition to the purchase and improvement of Washington Elementary for trails. The city council earlier this year adopted this trails master plan, which will require a significant amount of money, and indicated that they were interested in making, after years of discussions, beginning to make some real improvements to the trail system. As we discuss this bond opportunity for the property with the Trails Committee, they also felt strongly that this was a good opportunity to make some real progress on the Trails Master Plan. So the resolution you have before you does a couple of things. One, it signals the intent of the City Council to ask voters whether or not they would approve a general obligation bond. Two, it sets forth the language that would be on the ballot question. What we have in the draft resolution is language that specifically asks voters to vote for $8 million, which would be used to purchase and improve the Washington Elementary site and to improve and expand the city's trail system. I won't read that language specifically. You have that in your packet. It also sets forth that that we would delegate certain responsibilities to the city recorder, and sets in motion a series of steps that will include an eventual public hearing, a voter information pamphlet, and other information provided to voters that will help them determine whether or not they'd support this bond issue. Included in your staff report are a few of the commonly asked questions that we have received from the public as to why we would consider this bond election this year. And if the council would like, I'd be happy to highlight a couple of those just for your benefit, and answer any questions you might have before you consider the resolution. Is that something you'd like me to go through briefly? Let me highlight just a couple. The first and major question that we've received is why now? Why in this year? Why at this time are we considering this purchase? And the short answer is we don't get to pick when property becomes available. The city just gets to decide whether or not there's something to do with it. School district closed Washington Elementary in June and gave the city the right of first refusal to purchase the property. Without dipping into our fund balances, we would need to ask voters to raise property taxes to buy and improve the property. Otherwise, we would have to go into our reserves, contrary to the reserve policy that the council all adopted. And the school district has indicated that, and they've given us a price, they've indicated that that would need to be renegotiated. In all likelihood, that the property may just be put up for sale by the end of the year. It's entirely likely at that point it would just go to the highest bidder, and the property is currently zoned residential. It would probably be sold to a developer to be developed as housing, which is the current zoning. It's also surrounded by commercial and multifamily housing. Any of those uses would probably fit very well within our general plan. And so the question for the council was, would the council prefer to see that property left to be developed, or would the council prefer to give voters the opportunity to preserve that as open space? And we have really until the end of the year to decide. The school district given that up that time in recognition of a bond election. As I mentioned, what's likely to happen if we don't purchase the property is the school district will just sell it. And based on what we've seen, I'd look at Francisco for a differing opinion, but based on all the requests we've had, even our commercial property is being asked about to be developed into high density residential. That seems to be the going commodity these days. And so that's likely what it would be purchased and used for. The bonds, approximately $6 million would be available to purchase the property and make improvements to it. The additional $2 million, if the council goes that way, would be earmarked or intended to expand the city's trail system consistent with the Trails Master Plan that you all adopted. The question of cost to Bountiful residents. The average home in Bountiful is valued at $371,000. An $8 million bond would cost a property owner $32.57 per year. That's about $2.75 a month for an average home. That equates to a 1% increase in a resident's total property tax, current property tax bill. There was, I think, a legitimate question about the tax revenue that would come to the city if we let it simply be developed, because there is an argument to be made that the city would be foregoing property tax revenue from this. With the current zoning, the maximum density of those 10 acres would allow for 39 lots, I believe. That's the maximum number of lots that you could put on that property. If each of those lots was valued at $371,000, which is the average valuation in Bountiful, the total revenue to Bountiful City would be a whopping $6,500 a year. That's the total tax revenue that we would get, property tax revenue that we would generate. If those homes were all valued at $1 million, which is, or in other words, if these were apartments or it was a much higher valued use or something, and there was a lot more property value, even then the city would only realize about $20,000 a year in revenue. So we're not foregoing a huge amount of revenue, any significant revenue at all, out of a $60 million budget annually by not letting this property be developed. And then finally, there was a question I think asked via email that I thought I just might address quickly about the wisdom of bonding for recreation uses. I think an argument was made that you should never bond for rec uses. I would probably agree with that if it were a revenue bond where we were going to be diverting existing revenue towards a recreation use. But where this is dedicated revenue for a general obligation bond that will not impact any other city services, that's an entirely different question in my mind. In addition, a philosophy that could be considered is that the city should reserve its excise tax, sales tax bonding to do necessary improvements if we have to. Bountiful has no debt, so we've never had to do that. And that you allow general obligation bonds to be used for things that might be considered not necessary. You let the voters decide if they want to have it or not. And if they do, then they agree to tax themselves for it. That way you're not impacting the city's revenues to do something that might not necessarily be a need. I think that's an alternate perspective that has some merit. With that, Council, I'm happy to answer any questions about the resolution or Clint, who's prepared it, and turn it back to you for discussion.
Mayor, can I ask a question? Sure. Gary, on page 34, under analysis, the language of the bond.
Yes, sir.
I've had a few businesses in Bountiful call me that are struggling because of COVID and barely keeping their businesses open. And the question they asked me, which I couldn't understand, which I couldn't respond to, was why is a business paying more money on property tax than a resident?
It's a good question. Utah state law gives primary residences a 45% tax break. Businesses and second homes all pay 100% of the tax rate. So as primary residents, as primary homeowners, we get a 45% tax break.
Thank you. Another question, if I could, Mayor? Please. As we go down and read through the property tax cost on bonding, the very last sentence or the very last paragraph, the foregoing information is only an estimate and is not a limit on the amount of taxes that city may be required to levy in order to pay debt services on the bond. Could you explain that a little more for me, please? Absolutely. It's a really good question.
If voters approve this, the maximum amount of money that the city may generate is $8 million, not a penny more. In addition, we may only use it for the purposes stated in the bond. So What this is referring to is the fact that over time, the assessed valuation of the city changes, and the tax rate itself and the amount an individual may have to pay based upon their own valuation may fluctuate up or down. It won't probably stay 32.57 per year as someone's individual property valuation changes or as the overall valuation of the city changes. It's just to say they can't guarantee that this will be the exact dollar amount. What is a guarantee is that the city will have to adjust our rate up or down to collect exactly $8 million. Does that answer the question?
Other questions from the board, please, Kate.
Gary, could you explain what we anticipate our bond rating would be and what that means in terms of our ability to achieve the best rate for about the residents of this proposal?
Sure. We could expect, according to our financial advisor, a bond rating of a AA+ rating, which is a very high rating. And that's in part because of the financial reserves that the city has, because of the demographics we have, the variety of revenue sources, the fact that it's a general obligation bond and not an excise tax bond. To give you an example, the highest bond rating that Park City was ever able to generate was a AA-, which is 2 steps below a AA+. That's in part, it's not because of Park City wasn't financially well off. It had to do with their demographics and the fact that they're heavily reliant on one industry. Bountiful's much more broadly based. It's a very high bond rating. And it's very consistent with what the bond rating that we've seen for our power utility, which is a AA-, which for a utility is a very high bond rating. They're all considered grade A bonds. And so it's just an indication of how the financial health that Bountiful City has enjoyed for many, many years through good management.
So Gary, was it Jason that gave us that?
Yes.
Jason Birmingham, yeah, because I visited with him as well. So we do have an expert advice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Please.
From the survey, we saw that a breakdown of cost was very important to voters as far as where the money would be spent and how, and just the overall breakdown. Is the current, with the legal negotiations that we're in with the school district at this point, can the purchase price of the property be shared?
I don't know. And I've been pondering this all night. And here's why I don't know.
Because I've had a few questions as far as the breakdown is concerned.
Here's why I don't know. For the same reason that we have the ability to negotiate, we have the ability as cities and governments to negotiate in private with property owners so that somebody can't take advantage of taxpayers. I suspect that if the voters didn't approve this, or if the council didn't buy this property at the rate that's being offered by the school district, but somebody else knew how much it had been offered to us, it would hamper the school district's ability to get the full value of the property. We know that the school district is offering this at a below market rate. I don't know at this point if that is a public record or not, or if that's considered property negotiations. And in the absence of knowing that, I would hate to hamper a public entity's ability to get the best value for taxpayers. Does that make sense?
100%. I just wanted to get that on record for anyone in the audience who might be questioning that. So thank you for that clarification.
Before I hand it over to Clint, I will say this, that the $6 million includes the purchase of the property and a certain amount of budget available to make improvements to the property. So.
And just to be clear, any transaction would have to be done transparently in a public meeting. The public would know. It's just not at this point.
Thank you. I think it's important, that we
Do you want to speak in?
We give the public as much information as we can, knowing that there's some pieces we can't. Can we explain what we think the process would be if the bond was approved, how the money set aside for park improvements would be used? What process we anticipate based on past park developments, so that those that are interested in very specific
park uses would know what that process would be going forward and when the timing might be to engage in that part of the public process.
So great question also. So if voters approve this, and assuming the council puts it on the ballot and voters approve it in November, then the next step would be to close on the property, at which point the value of the property would be disclosed. And then at that point, the city would begin a public design process, similar to what we've done with both the Bountiful Town Square and Creekside Park, where we had multiple public meetings and had surveys in both cases, soliciting input from residents about what uses they would like to see there. And then those recommendations and thoughts were shared with the city council, who made the ultimate decision on what the uses would be. As I recall, with Creekside Park, I think we had 3 public meetings and we ended up with 4 different public meetings and a survey. I think the Bountiful Town Square was 3 public meetings and a survey.
Can you give at this point any rough estimates, not asking for months, but maybe what would be expected in, first quarter 2021 versus second, third, fourth, assuming of course that the virus is gone and we're all able to meet again. Many meetings.
Hard for me to say based on what other priorities might be of the city at that time, but based on what I perceive to be your direction up to this point is the city would, I think the interest would be to get on it as soon as possible, and that we would be looking to just begin that process in the first or second quarter of 2021. So before this fiscal year ends. Now, how long that process runs would depend on how many public meetings you want to have and things, but I can't see us waiting very long. We have a lot of very anxious user groups, pickleball, skaters, trail users, things and folks that I think we'd probably want to strike while the interest was hot.
Follow up, if I could, specific to trails, the portion of the money designated for trails versus parks, how would you anticipate the process would work to allocate those money for trail expansions versus improvements, and any sense of timeline on that?
So we have an existing Trails Advisory Committee. They've already prioritized their trails based on existing resources. I think what we would do is we would probably send them back with additional resources to reprioritize. On that point, I think this is a really important comment to make and direction I'd like to get from the council. But it was staff's recommendation in the staff report that none of the bond proceeds be used for the purchase or improvement of a trail in Mill Creek Canyon. You all recall that was a very controversial addition to the Trails Master Plan, or I should say inclusion. It actually wasn't an addition, it was always there. But I think to have good faith with those property owners who we said we would not force anything on them, that none of the proceeds for the bonds would be used for that particular trail. So I think that's something that would be important.
Gary, I appreciate you, Mayor,
Please.
I appreciate you reaching out to those folks and reassuring them of that intent. I think that was the right thing to do. So thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't have any questions. If you're ready for a motion, I'd be happy to make a motion.
Look for a motion.
I do want to say that bonding for this, or let me phrase it this way, leaving this decision up to the voters in the uncertainty that we're experiencing this year was uncomfortable to me at the start of this process, as you all know. It was very uncomfortable to me. And that's one of the reasons that I was extremely anxious to get the results from that survey. That being said, I'd be happy to make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-09, placing a general obligation bond in front of the voters for $8 million in November, and let the voters of Bountiful decide if they want to purchase this property and improve our recreation infrastructure.
Second, and I'd like to make a comment when it's appropriate as well.
Okay.
I think it's important for the voters listening in and those that might research this record later on to know that I was very worried, as I know were many of the council, along with Councilman Higginson, about the impacts of the virus on families and on businesses here in Bountiful, and that this might be a tough ask. We wrestled with it for several different meetings. Whether now was the time, even though we knew that the park usage was high before the pandemic and has only increased with people looking for opportunities to recreate safely close to home outside. Along with all of you, I engaged in what I call the looking for money in the city's couch cushions exercise to see if there was a way short of a bond to do so. It included exploring options with reserves. It included looking at any way we could think of to reprioritize and stretch RAP taxes, looking at revenue bonds, looking at rent-to-own options, everything that we could think of so that we would be cognizant of the impacts to families at this point. And I think it was money well spent to ask residents how they were financially feeling because of the pandemic, and that we wrestled with this decision as long as we could, quite frankly, before deadlines for the November ballot, because of those worries about our residents and the impacts the pandemic has brought to not just our city, but the state and our country and the world. So after engaging in that exercise, and I thank the staff for indulging me in looking at all of those couch cushions to see if there was significant funds that we might pool together to do this. I am reassured that we are making the best decision in asking the voters what they want going forward, and I think that is probably one of the best things, is just to place it before the voters and say, if this is a use that's important to you and your family, then you have your opportunity to speak in November. And I urge everyone to get registered so they're ready for that opportunity.
And you seconded?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, can I make a comment? We are landlocked. In other words, we have mountains above us, lake below us, cities on either side, and there's not many opportunities to get a piece of property in the city. And I know that's something we really struggled with the council, and I go along with Kate completely. There was a lot of struggle, a lot of thoughts. Pandemic did a lot to affect what we need to do, but the bottom line is we can't lose this piece of property. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment, Mayor? Just really quickly, Councilmember Higginson, would you be willing to add to your motion just to, and I left a piece of my draft on page 38 in the, on page 38 where it says election notice. If you go down under proposition, it asks the question, it ends with Bountiful Trail System question mark, including all ancillary and related improvements just needs to be taken out. So if you wouldn't mind including that in your motion.
I'd like to amend my motion to remove the phrase including all ancillary and related improvements.
I'm still happy to second.
And then Mayor, this will be a roll call vote. So when you're when the council's ready, I'll call it out.
Any further discussion?
I just want to comment that with or without a survey, I was excited from the start to put this to the voters to let them decide. So I think it's the right thing to do. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no other comments. I'll look to do a roll call vote. Okay.
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Aye.
Very much aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Richard. That vote is positive. Thank you. That's a very important thing. I think Y2 Analytics, thank you for all of your hard work. I know that I was really happy that you were going to do this, since you helped us with, in a related way, with the rec center. So we've really appreciated your work on a couple of different places, and so I'm really happy that happened. Thanks again.
Mayor,
yes.
Could I ask a favor?
Sure.
I'm nearly 2 hours late to a pretty serious family obligation. And because the last item is going to be continued anyway, presumably to another meeting.
Would you like to be excused?
May I please be excused?
Yes, you would be excused. Thank you. Does this have anything to do with the marriage coming up? Okay, good. Well, congratulations. All right. Next item, we'll turn over to Francisco.
Thank you, Mayor.
Our city planner. Thank you, Francisco.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a public hearing and continuation to August 25th, 2020. We're not asking you to take final action. This item is an amendment to the land use code to permit indoor shooting ranges in the general commercial subzone via a conditional use. And this item was originally noticed for the Planning Commission public hearing on August 4th and the City Council for today, August 11th. The Planning Commission continued this item last week, so they have not made either a positive or negative recommendation. Their final motion last week was simply to continue the item to the August 18th meeting. Therefore, we need City Council to simply continue this public hearing to the August 25th City Council meeting. This is a basic product of how we notice. We do 2-for-1 noticings for the newspaper and for all other requirements where we notice the Planning Commission hearing as well as the council. So we ran into these situations whenever the item gets continued. That's
Okay.
all I have.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll look to have a public hearing because we're obligated to today. But I think what we want to make very clear is that we're waiting to have another planning meeting in order to get the recommendation to the City Council from the Planning Commission, which we didn't have. But because we noticed it, we had to have a public hearing today. So if you want to wait until 2 weeks from today to do that, to make your comments, that would be certainly appropriate. If you feel like you're going to be out of town or something and you came specifically for this kind of a comment, you feel like maybe you're not going to be available to do it next time, then come up and tell us what you think. And I'd open the public hearing right now. Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing.
You won't close it, you'll just continue it.
Oh, I'm sorry. We will discontinue today's, we will continue the public hearing until the 26th. Thank you.
It'd probably be best to do it as a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we continue the
Thanks,
hearing on
Kate.
this item to our next city council meeting.
I'll
Okay,
second it.
then I've got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. That motion passes. And with that, if there are no other items to be discussed, do you have something, Kate?
No, I'm
No,
ready for that last motion.
Huh? So if there's nothing else, then we will, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn. Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Oh, dang it. Okay.